and O1s for FSU. And today's agenda will cover an overview of the U.S. immigration system, and just to give you some concepts, maybe you're not aware of how, certain concepts of the U.S. immigration system. We'll start there, then we'll review some important documents that you should be aware of and what they actually mean. And then we'll delve into the real reason why you're here, non-immigrant visas, specifically the H visa. And then we'll also cover some green card options for you, and we'll wrap up with the general advice as you move forward in your immigration journey in the U.S. So first, an overview of the U.S. immigration system. I also had a question. Are there any J1s in the audience? Okay, this one. Okay. Just so I know how to see if we emphasize J1s, but I will cover some J1 concepts. So first of all, some basics. Immigration law is very fluid. One day it could be one thing, and a couple of months later there's new policies or changes. So it's very important to always either ask your DSO officer or an immigration attorney, because what you read on the website might not be the same as they stand today. For instance, form additions might change, or fees might increase. So it's always important to reach out to those that really do this on an everyday basis. And then immigration law is not black and white. Unfortunately, a lot of these applications are very discretionary and really depends on the officer that is reviewing your case. So a lot of times I hear, well, my resume is the same as my friend and his N9W got approved. Well, that could be how it went for your friends, but it might not be the same for you. And then we'll cover what immigrant versus non-immigrant means. And so non-immigrants, when we're talking about non-immigrants, it's those foreign nationals that are in the U.S. for a temporary period of time. It could be your H1Bs, F1s, TNs, O1s, versus immigrant visas is those people with green cards that are allowed to be in the U.S. permanently. And finally, this concept as well I get a lot of questions on is that you really only need a U.S. visa if you're physically present in the U.S. If you're going to be working in Canada or elsewhere, you don't need a visa to work in those countries if you're working for a U.S. employer. It's really if you're physically within the U.S. that you need work authorization. And so here are also some government agencies that are involved in the immigration system, and I wanted to go over this because throughout the PowerPoint, I'm going to be talking about USCIS and DOS and DOL. And so USCIS is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and they're the agency that's responsible for all the immigration benefits in the U.S. So they're the agency that we file H1Bs with, they're the agency that we file naturalization applications with. And so you'll hear me talk about them a lot throughout the presentation. ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they're responsible for enforcing the immigration laws within the U.S., and then CBP is responsible for keeping our border safe. And you'll hear CBP because those are the officers that you encounter when you first enter the U.S. You come into the U.S., you talk to an officer, they ask you what's the reason for you wanting to enter the U.S., and that's your CBP officers. Now, the next agency, a lot of people don't realize that they are also involved in the immigration system, and they're the Department of Labor. And their component in the immigration system is that they're the agency that sets the wages required for several programs, such as the PERM or labor certifications, as well as the H1Bs. And then we have the Department of State, which houses all of the U.S. embassies and consulates all over the world. So if you received your F1 visa, from your country, your home country, you visited a U.S. consulate to get that visa stamped within your passport. And this is the only way that you can get a visa in your passport is from abroad. So here are a review of some documents that are important for you to know what they mean. And I get this question a lot as well. This document on the left is a U.S. visa. It'll have your picture on it with the information of what type of visa it is and the expiration on it, the validity dates, and all that information. Then we have the I-94, which is a very, very important document, and this is what really governs your stay in the U.S. So let's say you come to the U.S., you present your visa to the CBP officer, he allows you in, and then he will issue you an I-94 that you can retrieve electronically. So it's really important for you to review this I-94 every single time you enter the U.S. to make sure that it has the correct information, because CBP officers are human. They do make mistakes, and we catch that all the time. So it's important that if there are any mistakes, you get that amended with CBP. Now, if your visa expires while you're in the U.S., but your I-94 is good, then that is not an issue. You don't have to have a visa that's valid the whole entire time that you're in the U.S. It only matters if you travel internationally that you have to have a valid visa to return to the U.S.
So, yeah, I was going to chime in. The I-94 is what controls when you're inside the U.S. I always give the example of we see the visa stamp in your passport like a movie ticket. You have to have a ticket to get into the movie theater, but once you're into the movie theater, you can stay. So that's all. It's only just a ticket to get in. It's only needed on the very day that you travel. So in that vein, you could travel, this person could travel on March 2nd, 2017. On that day, they can enter the U.S. because they have a valid visa on that day. Just because it's ending that day doesn't mean they can't enter. So it's just like a movie ticket. And
I know that I said that the I-94 is what governs your stay in the U.S., but for F1s and J1s, that I-94 will stay DS, so duration of status. So for you, what really governs your stay in the U.S. is your I-20 or your DS 2019 for those J scholars. And this is really what governs your stay. It will have all your information on it. I know all of you are familiar with this, but the most important thing to get from this is that keep this safe, make copies, always have copies of everything that you obtain from your DSO officer, and just make sure that you understand the information that is included in your I-20s.
don't throw them away.
Don't throw them away.
Don't lose them. Don't lose them. Don't get them wet. Don't throw them out the window with you. Get another one.
Yeah. Don't think it's just a piece of paper.
Why YILCA, when you do your H1B, will ask you for everyone you've ever had since you've gotten here. Okay, so you don't want to, it's not a good look to have to call your university and say, hey, can you give me copies of all my, they did keep them, so it just depends on if you have a nice DSO that'll save you time to look up your case and send you off with PDFs.
And this one, I just included it so you could be familiar with it. Let's say you're an F1 and you find an H1B sponsor and they filed an H1B on your behalf. The way that USCIS communicates any immigration benefits to you is by issuing you an I-797. And there's different types of I-797s. This one, as you can see from the arrows on the top, is an approval notice. It'll state the class, H1B, and the validity dates. The most important part of this I-797 is the bottom, which has your new I-94. This is now what governs your stay in the U.S. on H1B status, and it replaces the I-94 that it was issued when you first entered the U.S.
The electronic one will not change. Right? Because you get this new one, it won't change the electronic system. So the next time that the electronic I-94, but this one overrides that one, but the next time you travel is the next time you'll get a new electronic I-94 that will say H1B. Yeah. So a lot of people freak out, like, when's my electronic gun? I'm like, they don't talk like that.
Yeah. And so now let's go ahead and cover non-immigrant visas. And like I said, those are your visas for a temporary period of time, which require what is called non-immigrant intent. And that means your intent needs to be you're coming to the U.S. to complete your activities here. Let's say you're studying or you're working temporarily, and then you're supposed to have the intent to return back to your home country. The only exception to this is the H and the L visas, which are dual intent. It means that you can be here temporarily, but you can also be searching or filing a green card application on your behalf. And for the non-immigrant visas, there's what we call an alphabet soup on the next slide, where there is a visa for every single letter in the alphabet. I went ahead and bolded the ones that we'll probably cover today. And now onto H1B that Leslie will see.
So in order to get the H1B, you have to have an employer who's going to sponsor you for the H1B. So it's an employer sponsored. You can't sponsor your own H1B. You can't create a company and sponsor your own H1B. All the funny questions I get, I'm like, no, everyone would do that. So it's a specialty occupation, meaning that it's a minimum of bachelor's degree has to be required by the position. It has nothing to do with you or how many PhDs you have. It has to do with the position that you're applying for that we're sponsoring you for. So,
It's on the side.
and not only does the position need to have a bachelor's degree, it has to be specific. So it really means, let's say, a chemical engineer. This requires a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. So you have to match as well. It has to be related very closely or a chemical engineer. So you have to match with the job. 6-year maximum stay for the H1B, and the grade still allows to give you a 3-year increments. But you can get it in 1-year increments if you want to do 5 extensions. You can extend that, please. So, CAP subject versus CAP exempt. Luckily, universities and research institutes are CAP exempt, and the CAP, you can explain it, yes, but...
So, don't say me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so there's 2 types of employers, either, like Leslie said, CAP subject or CAP exempt. You want to try your best to look for a CAP exempt employer, because what this means is that CAP exempt, they don't have a ceiling to H1Bs. For CAP subject employers, there's a ceiling of 85,000 visas per fiscal year. 65,000 for bachelor's degrees, and then 20,000 for advanced degrees. And
For the whole US of A.
for the whole U.S.
Florida, for the whole US.
Yes. So just to give you an idea of how difficult this is, on the next slide, I will go ahead and explain how the CAP subject employers sponsor you on H1B visas. It used to be a lottery system many years ago, where all the attorneys scrambled to get their positions in the first week in April, and then USCIS would randomly pick the applications for these lucky 65,000 US visas. A couple of years ago, it did change a little bit better, where now the employer has 2 weeks in March to register you or the employees that they want to sponsor for H1B visas. And then later on in April, USCIS will conduct a lottery system at random to choose who these 65,000 lucky foreign nationals will be that will have an H1B number. Thereafter, the employer then has to file the H1B petition on your behalf with USCIS, and that petition has to be approved so you can begin on H1B status October 1st of that year. So just to give you an idea of how difficult this is, this year we did see a huge decline in registration. Employers submitted 423,000 registrations for those 85,000 visas. Last year, we saw 780,000 registrations. So as you can see, it is very difficult, but not impossible. We do file H1Bs for CAP subject employers. However, it's just a difficult process.
Yeah, so also, if you have a master's or PhD from a U.S. university, you get a second bite at that apple. So you have a better chance of getting one of the lottery winners. What she was saying is that We used to have to put the entire H-1B packet together and then send it in and then get chosen or not. Now you get chosen first and don't have to worry about doing the packet if you're not chosen. So it's better. I'll listen. Yeah.
So the H1B is really one of the visas that are the most heavily regulated visa out of them all. It's really specific to your employer, to your job title, work style, job duties. So when you start that H1B, you can only work for the employer that filed that H1B for you. However, that doesn't mean that you can't change jobs. You're not tied to that employer for the full 6 years. If you would like to change jobs, this new employer has to file what is called an H1B, change of employer, on your behalf, and then it has to be approved. Now, if there's different scenarios that I put on here for to change employers, I'm not going to go through with them all, but just know that if you think that you can start with a CAP exempt employer, so a university, and then move to a CAP subject employer, if you want to try and do that, it will be difficult because then you will have to go through the lottery system. It can't be just going with the university to get an H1B and then moving to a CAP subject. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So your employer would have to register you with the lottery, get selected, and then file that H1B, change of employer, on your behalf if you get selected.
Moving to the loophole.
Yes.
Okay, there is a little bit of a trick. If you continue your position with the CAP exempt university, and you have a CAP subject industry employer who wants to do your H-1B for you, they don't have to go through the lottery because you can have coverage by having an H-1B with your CAP exempt employer. But you have to keep both jobs going. So how I've seen this happen in real life is that a lot of times the CAP exempt, like university, will change you down to part-time or something, and then the CAP subject employer will put you at full-time. So you're working 60 hours a week, but don't have to go to the lottery system. That's a tough one. And you're probably making a lot of money. It's fine.
So I listed here a couple of H1B frequently asked questions that we normally get. I know that Leslie already covered this regarding finding your own H1B. Unfortunately, because the H1B has an employer-employee relationship requirement, you can't file your own H1B. There are entrepreneurial H1Bs, but they're very, very difficult. We do have to establish a right to control, and really USCIS really just doesn't like these types of H1Bs. Who can you work for? We've already covered that. You can have multiple H1Bs, but you do have to have an H1B for that employer. You can go you can be on an H1B part-time, like Leslie said. And the next question regarding the promotion or any changes to your H1B terms, as USCIS has already approved them, is that the employer would have to file what is called an H1B amendment. So any changes, let's say you start off in an entry-level position and then you get promoted to a managerial position. That's great, but your employer would need to file what is called an H1B amendment to get this new position approved.
So any change, your location, if you move offices, or if you go remote, after we've already approved your H-1Bs, we have to do an H-1B amendment on your behalf.
So what if you lose your job, right? You started your H-1B, you're like, yes, I got an H-1B, I started my job. A year later or a couple months later or whatever, you lose your job. What happens then? USCIS does issue a 60-day grace period if you have time left on your H-1B to either change statuses to a different status or find another employer to sponsor you and file that change of employer on your behalf. For my J1, I'm not sure if they are subject, but if you are subject to the 2-year home residency requirement, then you cannot file an H-1B because they don't allow you to change statuses. to an H1B without fulfilling that 2-year residency requirement or obtaining a waiver of that requirement.
Yeah, I think I covered the work site management amendment. So the good thing about the amendment is that once we submit it, you can work at the new work site again. Upon submission, you don't have to wait till you approval to come back to start working at the new job site.
Down.
Went from these.
Yeah. Can you study on the H1B? I think it's not in the law, right? So people have their own, whatever they think it should be. My thing is, if you can keep up with your H1B, all the work that you need to do for the H1B, you're maintaining your status, in my opinion. And so you have to get your manager has to be on board with it. But I feel like you can study if you want.
Yeah.
As long as you're maintaining your responsibilities as an H1B.
Down.
The travel internationally, like we said before, you can definitely travel internationally after an H1B, but you will have to visit the consulate abroad to obtain that new H1B visa in your passport so you can return to the U.S. and ask the CBP officer to allow you to enter to continue your H1B employment.
There are no U.S. consulates inside the U.S. at this point. They've got one little situation for Indian nationals.
Yes, it was a pilot program.
Yeah, it was a pilot program. It's sailed. So I don't know
If they'll bring it back.
right, but it was very popular. Yeah, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just remember you don't have to go get the visa unless you have international travel. But when you do have to get the visa to come back in. Okay. Spouse and children. So H4s, children are never eligible to work. So, even when they turn 18, they're not eligible to work or 16 when work age is. Spouses, however, they can work once the H1B gets an approved I-140, which is the first step of the green card. Okay? So most H4s cannot work, and when you do get to that point, if your spouse gets the I-140 approval, they have to submit the EAD card application to wait 90 days and pay $500. And I mean, it's not automatic. So,
Yeah.
who pays your H1B fees? The major fees have to be paid by your employer only. They cannot take it out of your paycheck, they cannot give you extra money, and then you give it back to them. No funny business. They have to pay it straight out. The premium processing, anyone can pay. So the employee or the employer can pay for that if you wish to have premium processing. It takes your case from anywhere from 4 to 6 months to 2 weeks. But it's also $2,800. They keep raising it, and we making it. So just too.
So here I just wanted to cover another requirement of the H1B, and this is why it's also a bit of a challenge for H1B employers or finding an employer to sponsor you, is because the H1B program requires either the actual wage or the prevailing wage rate to be paid to the foreign nationals. And what this means is if we're going through the prevailing wage rate, then we file a prevailing wage determination application with the Department of Labor, and they come back and tell us what your salary should be based on the terms of this specific job that's being offered to you. Versus an actual wage where the attorney will review the job being offered and give our best analysis of what other same and similarly situated workers are getting paid for this specific role. And really this is to protect not just American workers, but also foreign nationals, right? We want you all to get paid what you deserve in this specific job. However, it does create that challenge for other employers that may not be able to pay these salaries because they might be a smaller employer or they're just a startup or something like that.
Yeah, so we at FSU use the actual wage. When you do the prevailing wage, it takes 8 months.
Yeah.
To get it back. You give them a job description and a job title, and they take 8 months to get back to you on that. So we don't have all that kind of time. A lot of people want their H1B in a month.
Yeah, or start dates. Yeah.
Right, so we always use actual wage. Works out fine. What else was I gonna say?
Yeah. Because I represent other schools, there is a mixture of what schools do follow. Like Leslie said, FSU follows actual wage. I have other institutions that do follow the prevailing wage determination, and they will not allow the H1B to begin until the PWZ is issued from the Department of Labor.
I was going to say that F1s and J1s aren't subject to the prevailing wage. So they can pay you underneath the prevailing wage if they want to, your OPTs and your J1s. But
yeah, this is just specific to H1Bs. And so when we're talking about the next concept, it's called the cap gap automatic extension, and this is really only applicable to cap subject. So let's say you are on F1, you graduate in May, June, but your start date on the H1B won't take effect until October 1st. What are you supposed to do during that time? Well, USCIS came up with cap gap, which covers you during that time. If your employer files your H1B change of status application before your OPT ends, then cap gap extends your work authorization and you can remain in the U.S. until October 1st when that H1B status kicks in. However, sometimes the employer might have to file that H1B during the 60-day grace period, or maybe the F1 does not have OPT at all. And in that case, that if you have to file the H1B during that 60-day grace period, the cap gap automatic extension will allow you to remain in the U.S. until that October 1st date kicks in, your H1B status, but you will not be able to work during that time.
so it works for people who just graduate as well?
Yeah.
And have never even applied for OPT before?
Right, yeah.
If they have STAT, they can't work.
Exactly. But we have to file during that 60-day grace period.
Okay. Yeah. I'll learn something new today. Because I always thought it was just had to do it on the OPT, but I'm old. So I was here when this was put in. I was here when OPT came to be. You can say that.
Say it again.
2-year extension. So, what did I do?
Oh, that's okay. I think you just...
How's it going backwards if I'm going forwards? Maybe going on the way? Yeah, I'm writing up message. Ballot.
Okay, we're back on chapters 30.
And so, yeah, it can be pretty interesting, but basically, hopefully, this will sort of affect. You have to, is distinctive. It only works when you are working with a cap subject.
Yes.
H1B. It doesn't work when you're, like if FSU had gotten your H1B approval, we cannot use the cap gap at all because we don't have the October 1st.
Right, you could start right away. So you don't even have to worry about this.
With a cap extent.
You don't get. So some of those H1B obstacles that we have covered so far. Finding a job, right? You first have to find a job, find the employer willing to sponsor you and to pay all those fees, because by law they have to be the ones paying those fees, entering the lottery in March, winning the lottery, and then finally getting that H1B approved so you can begin on October 1st on H1B status. So definitely some obstacles there. So if the H1B doesn't work, then you can...
I also want to say, don't get discouraged. Because Anil Kadnor and I would have a job if people did not do H1B for you. Okay? So don't think you're never going to be able to overcome some of these challenges. Yeah. Okay, good.
So if the H1B does not work, then obviously, like Leslie said, do not get discouraged. There are other options, hopefully, either OPT or STEM OPT. I mean, they have added so many new degrees to that STEM OPT list. You can also consider going back to school for an advanced degree, or we can discuss other non-immigrant options for you.
And I always encourage you to use up the work authorization that you have. So if you have one, sometimes you can get up to 3 years. And people come to me the first day they're working on their OPT and say, hey, I want an H1B. I'm like, no. Just word. You would be leaving 3 years of work authorization on the table if you go to H1B now. So don't be in a big hurry. It doesn't help you to be in the H1B. Doesn't help you for your green card. It doesn't. I mean, it's good to have sometimes, but it doesn't give you a better chance of getting the green card to be on the H1B visa. So you should tell them that. Again.
And so we can start with the L1, which, like I said in the beginning, it is that other visa that allows for dual intent. The L1, probably most of you will probably not be able to qualify for this because it does require 1 year prior employment with that enterprise abroad. So this is basically what we call a transferee visa, where the U.S. employer wants to transfer either their managerial, executive, or specialized knowledge employee from abroad to the U.S. And so this is that type of visa one here, and I like visuals. Just to give you like a visual for the EB1As and the EB1Bs categories that we'll be talking about, and NIWs, you're skipping that first step. You're going straight to the I-140 and you're requesting USCIS to categorize you in that EB1 outstanding professor or EB1A extraordinary abilities. So you're skipping the whole market test required for perm or labor certification.
It is my least favorite part of my job.
Same.
It's just really long and it's a lot of work for everybody, but...
Yeah, just to give you an idea, the Department of Labor right now, processing times for perms are over 400 days long. So not only do you have to go through the prevailing wage determination of 8 months, like Leslie said, but then even when you get to file the perm, then it's another 400 days that you're waiting to see if it gets approved.
It's 400 days after this and going. It's long and intuitive.
So.
But when you see people get green cards,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, this is a great job, but you go into it, you're like, yeah,
So here we broke down the different categories. I'm not going to go through it, but like Leslie said, the EB1A does not require the employer to sponsor you. It can be self-petition. However, it is the highest standard. If I can avoid the EB1A, I will do so at every cost because USCIS just has a really high standard for this type of application. In order to show that your level of expertise is one of those that have risen to the top of their field of endeavor, we have to meet 3 of the 10 criteria. And again, USCIS loves this criteria, so they use it for the O1, for the EB1A and the EB1B. They're all very similar.
Just to clarify, so you have 2 different policies working here. You have the government policy about what you can do with immigration. You have FSU. So we will not pay for anyone, we will not allow anyone to do the EB1B through us and us pay for it, or you pay for yourself, unless you are research faculty 1, 2, or 3. So a postdoc, since it's not a permanent position, does not qualify for EB1 and a green card, EB1B. But you can go to any lawyer you want and ask them to do EB1A on your behalf as a postdoc. It's just that your employer is not going to be able to sponsor you because you're not a permanent employee with us.
Yeah, and on that same note, on the next slide, we have the EB1 outstanding professors and researchers, and actually that is one of the requirements of the EB1B is that you have a bona fide job offer, meaning it either has to be tenure track, or permanent research position. So that's what Leslie was referring to as well. That is actually one of the requirements, and that's why postdocs don't qualify, because postdoc positions are temporary by nature. We have to demonstrate that you're outstanding in your field. And again, we look at your publications, your citations, just basically your original contributions to the field. And I've had a lot of success with all the EB1Bs that we filed.
She really has.
Yes.
Yeah, we've had only approvals just every year. But FSU sees tenure track and tenure track equivalent positions to be assistant professor, associate professor, or faculty, research faculty 1, 2, or 3. Assistant in research does not qualify. It does not qualify for H1B. Like you said.
See, I learned something new too.
Yeah, I don't send this to you.
Yeah. And then finally, we have the national interest waiver, which everyone is probably eager to hear about. So the national interest waiver, it is self-petition, so you don't need an employer to sponsor you. You don't need a bona fide, you don't need a job offer to file this on your own. The criteria is that the foreign national's proposed endeavor is basically interest to the U.S. and that the foreign national is well positioned to advance the proposed endeavor. And on balance, it is in the best interest of the U.S. to waive that firm and labor certification that we were talking about earlier. Even though the national interest waiver does not require employer sponsor, we at Fragment do handle a lot of NIWs for professors and researchers that might not be to the level of an outstanding professor or researcher. So we tell them, hey, let's file the NIW, get your place in line for that green card, and then we can work on your resume, strengthen it, and then we can talk about an H1B in the future if that becomes a possibility. But NIW is very popular because of this administration. They do have a lot of policy out there that they want to attract STEM talent, and so this is a really good option for those STEM PhDs or even master's degrees. Unfortunately, the bachelor's, it's advanced degrees that qualify. So we usually technically file with either master's or a PhD in a STEM field. I think that's all. And now the reason why the NIW got so popular is now the reason why it has been pretty problematic for F1s or J1s that want to file the NIWs. A couple of years ago, what was happening was that the F1s were going straight to the green card because they filed their NIW, they got it approved, and they were in line to file for that green card. However, the NIW or the EB2 category is now backlogged on the visa bulletin. And what this means is that even though you're an F1 student, you file your national interest waiver, it gets approved. That's it. You can't move on to that third step that we're talking about because there's just no green cards available for you in that category. And here I just put a snippet of the September visa bulletin so you have a visual of what I'm talking about. And on the left, you'll see the employment phase. First category, the EB1s that we've been talking about, the EB2, where NIWs fall. Then the visa bulletin is further divided into all chargeability, and then all the other countries that the U.S. feels are overrepresented in the U.S. So just to give you an example, let's say you're an F1 student born in India, and we filed your NIW this year in March 1st, 2024. It got approved. Great, your I-140 is approved. Let's see if we can file a green card for you. So if you look on the EB2, under China, they are working on priority dates before July 22nd, 2012. So we are very, very far away from that date, and you will be waiting many, many, many years for that green card. So from that F1, you have to maintain status. You have to either go from F1 to an H1B or another non-immigrant visa to allow you to remain in the U.S. and continue working in the U.S. while you wait for your priority date to become current. Now, at least you have a place in line, and hopefully through, future jobs, you get to move on up to an EB1, and you get to keep that priority date. But for right now, you can't file for your green card, unfortunately.
But I just want to tell you though, once you get your I-140 approved at any level, you can use that I-140 to extend your H1B past the 6 years for 3-year increments until you are current. Okay, so having the L-140 approval, whether it's a DB2 and you're from India or China, that's great because you are insured. Even if you move on to a different employer, you can still use your previous employer's I-140 approval to extend your H-1B past the 6-year max. Okay.
That is the bright, that's the silver lining to
Yeah, so L-140, and also, we talked a little bit before, once you get the L-140 approval, your spouse is eligible to apply if you're in H-1B. Your spouse is eligible to apply for the H-4ED at that point. Yeah. All right?
So those are exceptions.
Pluses. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So your goal should still be to get that I-140 approval. And then just general advice to wrap up regarding your immigration journey here in the U.S. Like we mentioned, now that you hopefully learned something about those documents, you will keep copies of everything and hopefully upload them to the cloud somewhere and keep them safe. So one day when you are filing for that green card and we ask you for your expired passports, you have that handy, even airline tickets, I-94s, I-20s, just anything that you can think of that will be beneficial to you once you get to that green card stage.
You'll be so surprised. So like if you come to me and say I burned all my things on purpose, I'll be nice to you, but I will side-eye you the whole time. Like, why did you do that? I've had people throw away their passports. No, I threw away it. No. So those are really, got to keep on to those. You just have a box that's just for your, and preferably make it fireproof. Have a box that has all your immigration stuff in it. Don't lose that stuff.
Yes. Also, if you're ever unsure of any activities that you want to engage in, can I become an Uber driver for extra money? Or there's this volunteer gig, can I do that? It's always important to check with your DSO officer, the ISS office, or an immigration attorney, because the worst thing that you can have is unauthorized employment. And when it comes down to finding that green card application and listing all of your employers, and also submitting your financial documents, they will see, where did this money come from? So it's really important for you to ask questions now instead of doing it and then ask for forgiveness later. For immigration purposes, you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that whatever you engage in, whatever activities, it's definitely allowed under any type of immigration visa that you hold in Big West.
I will have to add that it doesn't have to be an exchange for money. Okay, so USCIS can deem your volunteer to have been work if it's in your area of study, because you're getting experience out of it and you've put it on your CV as experience. But you didn't have work authorization when you did it. So you have to be really careful with those real gray areas. Just because they don't pay you money doesn't mean it's not work for immigration purposes. So if you have any of those questions, go to your DSO, go to your ARO, go to me, and we'll discuss it. Sometimes it's like, I don't know, I wouldn't do it. That $60 is probably not worth your future in the US. But another thing is this last thing. If you get into any sort of trouble here in the US, like a DUI or disorderly conduct or something like that, just remember that they can revoke your visa without telling you they've revoked your visa. Okay? So if you get into any criminal mischief or trouble or something, you need to be very careful. Even if it is expunged or is it sealed or anything like that, it doesn't go away ever for immigration purposes. Okay? They're going to ask you to provide that information whether it's underneath the courthouse or not. So for regular folks, Americans walking around, if they get it expunged, they don't have to worry about it anymore. But if you're on any kind of visa, or even really green card, you're still deportable.
Yes. Yep. So just keep that in mind.
Don't mean to end it up on no, but be really careful and don't be worried to speak with this to your immigration lawyer, because you really need help with stuff like that.
Definitely.
And that's what they're for. Yeah.
the last slide. So thank you so much for sharing your Friday afternoon with us on this rainy day. Here's our contact information. I know I forgot conveniently. Yes, sorry, that was. Here's our contact information. I have presented to FSU before, so I know that you all know that you can reach out to me if you have your resume that you want me to look at for NIW purposes, or just have quick immigration questions. Shoot me an email. I'm happy to help FSU. I love coming back here. I graduated from here, so my heart is here. So I definitely don't mind a trip up here or answering any of your questions. And thank you to Leslie and to Darren and to everyone for having us do this.